Hello everyone, it is Matt here from Scoop in Response. It's been quite a while since I've done one of these, but it's time for me to do another deck tech on a commander that I've been umming and ahhing about for quite some time. I don't usually do, I guess, your typical tribal decks for the most part, but with the release of Double Masters 2, I just couldn't help myself. There's a particular card in that set that has been something that I've wanted to build around for ages and ages, but I just couldn't justify the cost. And so here we are now with the Dragon leading the pack for this one. The card itself is actually a Thrumming Stone, which up until recently was like a $50 or a $60 card. And I struggle to sort of spend that kind of money on a card that's a bit of a meme for the most part. It's like a $60 card that's really not good in 90% of decks, and being a commander format, you don't have access to playing multiple copies of cards for things for the most part, with the obvious exceptions of things like Dragon's Approach and Rats and Apostles and all of that kind of stuff. So today we're going to be looking at a Dragon deck that is, I think it really is more true to the idea of what a Dragon deck should be doing. I think people typically imagine, these big stompy, monstrous threats coming out and getting dropped on the board all the time. But for me, what I think about with Dragons is I think about fire, I think about burn, and I think about, things of that nature. So we've gone a bit of a different route. So with Thrumming Stone and Dragon's Approach, obviously we can just burn out our opponent. It is possible to just burn them in one go. It's pretty unlikely, but if you sort of ripple enough and you just continuously, ripple off the top and continuously re-trigger that ability, you can go ham, and reasonably you could probably expect to see 9 to 12 damage in a single go before you have a whiff. That wouldn't be too crazy difficult given the number of Dragon's Approaches that you'd want to be running in this kind of deck. But there's one other thing that this is probably not going to seem like it's the most obvious choice straight away, but thematically I think it's fantastic. And I'm actually really excited about sort of blending these two ideas together with this deck. So the other, I guess, big piece of this deck is that we're actually a bit of a lands deck. Specifically, we're a Valakut deck. And one of the biggest problems that Valakut has in Commander over every other format is that, well, one, you can't run 4 of them, but 2, there's just not enough good lands that are mountains. Unless you're in 5 color, of course, when you've got access to every mountain ever printed, basically, and you can effectively have every single land being a mountain, counting towards your mountain count for Valakut. I haven't included Scape Shift or anything like that, purely because it's just never going to be enough damage to be able to kill the whole table unless you've got some really crazy things happening, doubling and tripling the triggers from Valakut. But, I don't think there's really anything more dragony than the idea of a volcano, spewing out fire and having your dragons flying around and doing all of that kind of stuff. So we've got this bit of lands package to go with what is effectively, it's a bit of a combo deck really. So we'll jump in and we'll have a look at the list. So I've broken this into 2 parts. We've got our non-lands and our lands, but basically we're going to be spending most of our time looking at the non-lands because our lands are just for color fixing and as well as a few ways to create multiple copies of Valakut. So right off the bat, the big thing that you'll notice is that we've got 32 copies of Dragon's Approach. So if you're not familiar with the card, I'll just read it out for you. Dragon's Approach deals 3 damage to each opponent. You may exile Dragon's Approach and 4 cards named Dragon's Approach from your graveyard. If you do, search your library for a dragon creature card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. A deck can have any number of cards named Dragon's Approach. So we're running 32. It's basically a third of the deck. You can probably go up a little bit higher if you wanted to. It really depends on how much you want to lean into the burn nature. Now, the exciting thing about this card is that it deals 3 damage to each opponent, not just 1, it's each opponent. So that's super important because we're not going to be, able to kill anyone if we've got to do, 34 copies of burn to each opponent. If you're going to have 34 copies of lightning bolt, that's how many you'd probably need to kill your opponents. Is that right? Seems about right. We're going to go with that anyway. So yeah, 32 copies per opponent to kill them. So it's 34 copies per opponent to kill one person just with bolts. So that's never going to happen if we've got single target. Now, we're not expecting to just completely burn out the table just with our dragons approaches. We're looking to do a whole lot more than just do the burn damage, because we can also, you know, tutor for dragons out of the deck so that we can actually have a bit of a game plan with everything like that. So we'll go in from top left to bottom right in terms of what we're actually looking at. So we've got Mana Crypt. This is a really big high CMC for all of our threats deck, so we want to be including something like our premium ramp. I've opted for Mana Crypt and Soul Ring, as you can see, as well as Arcane Signet, mostly because they're universally pretty useful, and you'll see all of the pips on our creatures. We've got a lot of generic mana for every single creature, so there's not going to be a lot of spells where these aren't actually assisting in the cast. Locket of Yesteryears. Now I'll read this one for you guys as well. It's a bit of a weird one. So it's a 1-drop. So it's an artifact. Spells you play cost 1 less for each card with the same name as the spell in your graveyard. So if you're playing 32 copies of a card like Dragon's Approach, it means the first one might cost 3, but then the second one will cost 2, and the third one will cost 1. And then you can continue to cast each for 1 as you keep going until you exile your 5 and you start again. So it's a massively huge cost reducer for a really, really cheap price. So super good for something like that. Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, we've already mentioned those. Desperate Ritual is a ritual effect, add 3 red. So you can see just from this screen, we've got quite a lot of red pips. So you can expect to be able to utilize those red pips pretty well. It's really just about getting the getting the ramp where we need to. And I kind of didn't really want to play non-dragons in the deck. You know, there's plenty of things that we could be playing, but I figured, why not? Let's just go all in on the dragons. There is one exception, which is our Dragon Speaker Shaman, which is a human barbarian shaman. We'll go over that in a little bit later. But yeah, I just basically wanted to keep it pure to the idea of dragons, and that way, you know, you're going to have lots of things that you can be doing. You could probably cut some of these creatures. You could probably trim on the, the Thrumming Stone or the Locket if you're not sort of into that sort of combo element of it, and just play a more stompy, I guess, deck. But yeah, basically with this, we're looking to sort of ramp up in Desperate Ritual, and you can see Pyretic Ritual on the second line is another card that's going to really help us with that. Next up, we've got Dragon Tempest. So whenever a creature with flying enters the battlefield under your control, it gains haste until end of turn. So it's a 2-drop, and it gives everything haste, but just yours. So, there are 1-drop cards that we can have, like Concordant Crossroads and things like that, that are going to be giving us more haste at a cheaper rate. But basically, it's going to give our opponents haste as well, so we don't want that. But we get this sweet line, which is whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, deals X damage to target creature or player, where X is the number of dragons you control. So, you can see that we've got the Morite and the Bladewing the Risen. That's a 2-card combo in the deck, and with something like Dragon's Tempest or your Terror of the Peaks, you can actually sort of just nuke them to death on the spot by looping that, and it's sort of an Impact Tremors style loop. So this is just a way that we can achieve that, if we want to go for the combo win. Next up, we have Life from the Loam. Return up to 3 target land cards from your graveyard to your hand. Look, this card is just insane. Particularly for a deck where we want to be putting lots of copies of Dragon's Approach in the bin, because that's where they get exiled from. So every time we're casting Life from the Loam, if we've got a fetch land that we can be taking advantage of, we're also getting 2/3 of the deck basically are useful as dredge targets for us, because we've got 32 lands, we've got 33 lands, and we've got 32 Dragon's approaches. Pyretic Ritual is next up on the next up for the deck. It's just another ritual. We've also got Ruby Medallion, which is another cost reducer for red spells. So you'll see that most of our cards are red. There's a few that aren't red, but pretty much all of our non-colorless cards have red in them, except for maybe 1 or 2 of them. So another great one for that. Back in line with the lands plan, we've got Wrenn and 6, so it's just another way to get back lands. You can also leave 1 copy of Dragon's Approach in the bin, and then you can eventually get the emblem with Wrenn and 6, and you can just be retracing it each turn rather than exiling it for additional burn if you do need to. So that's pretty sweet. Works really well for a deck like this. Cloud Key, another cost reducer for our Dragon's Approach. It's just a strict 1 reduced each time, so really good rate on that for 3. Yeah, it's just another way of sort of, you know, reducing the cost so that you can sort of power out the damage. You're probably going to pull a lot of hate if you start pumping out all of those Dragon's Approaches really quick. So I would sort of prepare yourself to and set yourself up so that you can actually have, you know, a bit of a plan around how you're going to deploy some defensive things before you sort of go ham with all of your burn. Dragon Speaker Shaman, dragon spells you cast cost 2 less. Absolutely insane. It's a 3-drop, it's a 2/2. So sometimes, you know, you can sort of block a big thing and it'll save you before you get online, so that's great. But, you know, for the most part, we're not blocking with this, we're just using it to cast our dragons a lot cheaper. Next up, we have Valakut Awakening, which is a modal dual-face land. Put any number of cards from your hand onto the bottom of your library, then draw that many cards +1. A really sweet way to, you know, effectively just keep all of your dead draws, put them back into the deck so that you can actually tutor them out. So if you do draw, you know, your Morophon or something like that, and you really wanted to tutor it with a Dragon's Approach, this is just a way that we can do that. We've got Goldspan Dragon, which is just an absolutely sweet dragon, you know, a bit of a standard all-star. Flying haste, whenever Goldspan Dragon attacks or becomes the target of a spell, create a treasure token. So lots of ramp. It's only red, so you can potentially get this off as early as, you know, turn 2. And it also has treasures you control, have sacrifice this artifact, add 2 mana of any color instead of just 1 mana, so it actually makes your treasures even better. Of course, you can add a Dockside Extortionist to this deck. No one would think that you were weird for doing that. Once again, it's just for thematic purposes. I've sort of chosen not to include him in that deck just because he's a bit of a staple for everyone. So, you know, you can sort of choose if you want to include that. But he did get a reprint, so that's pretty sweet. Mana Geyser is a sort of big ritual. Add 1 red for each tap land your opponents control, so that's really sweet. You know, if you're not getting more than like, you know, 5 or 6 mana from this, that'd be very weird. Yeah, it's an absolutely insane thing, you know, and even just getting from 5 mana to like 8 mana so that you can cast something like your, you know, your Utvara Hellkites or something like that. It's going to be super useful. You know, maybe there's an option as well where you can be casting your Dragonstorm too. So, yeah, next up we have Morite of the Frost. As I mentioned earlier, it's a combo card, so you can have it enter as a copy of a permanent you control, except it's legendary and snow in addition to its other types. And if it's a creature, it enters with 2 additional +1 counters, and it has Changeling. So this card will actually combo with Bladewing the Risen. So when Bladewing enters the battlefield, you can return a dragon permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So basically what happens is Bladewing is on the battlefield, Morite enters the battlefield one way or another. You could even have it in your graveyard. Morite enters the battlefield as a copy of Bladewing. It is legendary ruled out before the trigger goes onto the stack. So effectively your trigger for Morite will resolve after it's already in the bin, and it can return a copy of itself to the battlefield because it's entering as a copy of Bladewing the Risen, and it gets the ETB trigger, which will resolve after it's left the battlefield. So you continuously have it target itself from the bin each time it loops and just comes in and out of play as many times as you would like. And then if you have something like your Terror of the Peaks or your Dragon Tempest, you can just kill all of your opponents then and there, assuming they can't deal with it. Okay, next up we have Scion of the Dragon. Just a great all-round card. It's a good way to tutor things. You can search for your Morite and put it into the graveyard, and then it becomes a copy of the Morite, which could be a, you know, anything that you wanted to double up or anything like that. So it's pretty sweet. But mostly it's just a way that you can get the Morite straight into the bin. So if you need to start the combo, you can get the Scion out onto the battlefield, get the Morite into the bin, and then your next you know, resolution of your search from your Dragon's approaches gets the Blade Wing, and then you start the combo to win, basically. So yeah, very cool. You know, because in the next turn you can also search your library for the Terror of the Peaks, and it only costs 2, and then Scion's actually a Terror of the Peaks for that turn, so really sweet. So yeah, it's a bit of a compact combo card, you know, in this deck. Next we've got Scourge of Valks. It's just a real big beater. ETBs, and you deal damage equal to X to target creature or player, where X is the number of dragons. So, you know, once again, it's another way to kill people with, like, exactly the same as Terror of the Peaks or something like that. So we talked about Terror of the Peaks quite a bit already. It's basically just that it is there to be an impact tremors that's really, really big, but because it's a, you know, a flying 5/4 for 5, it's just a good rate for a threat as well. We've got Thrumming Stone. We sort of went over that right at the start. Really sweet card in this deck. Wrathful Red Dragon. So flying, whenever a dragon you control is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target that isn't a dragon. So basically you're going to turn off things like Blasphemous Acts. So you know, probably a sweet card that you could put in this deck too if you wanted to sort of lean into that. It'd be really cool. Yeah, that's pretty much the idea for this guy. Ancient Copper Dragon's another one that's really cool, you know, for those treasure tokens. Just absolutely insane. It's a 6-drop for a 6/5 flying. Yeah, whenever you deal combat damage to a player, you roll a d20, create treasure tokens equal to the result. So something like that could be super sweet to sort of open with, so that you're not actually overcommitting, you know, those threats the first time. So let's say you resolve your search from the from the Dragon's Approach, and you get something like this. If you have a haste enabler, you're going to create a whole bunch of tokens, or they're going to use their premium removal, and, you know, you're in the clear for the next go. Dragon Broodmother, look, it's just a big beater. Flying 4/4. Each upkeep, you put a dragon creature into play. It's a token with flying and Devour 2. And Devour 2 is, as the token comes into play, you may sacrifice any number of creatures. It comes into play with twice that many +1 counters on it. So you make one, and then you make another, and then it eats its buddy, and then it gets +2, or you make one, then you make 2, and then you make 3, and then the 4th one eats all of its buddies and becomes really big. So yeah, lots of cool things you can do with that. Really sweet card. Another new one from the Baldur's Gate is, I'm gonna butcher this, Miriam Sentinel Worm. So it's got Flying Warden 2. It's a Teamer Dragon. Whenever another non-token dragon ETBs, create a token that is a copy of it, except the token isn't legendary if that dragon is legendary. So this card is really, really sweet because you can actually create free copies of itself with Morite, because Morite will enter as a legendary version of the Miriam, which will create the token copy which is non-legendary of the Miriam, and the Morite will still die because Morite's effect is what you're actually wanting to get him back into the bin. And so that way, when you actually have the Morite enter the battlefield each time as something like a Blade Wing or anything like that, you can just stack those triggers up absolutely insanely. You can just create so many because you've actually got 2 copies of Miriam on the battlefield before the Morite combo will start, and then as it continues, it's just going to triple the amount of tokens that you get, triple the amount of ETBs. It's absolutely insane card overall. So the Okagachi Vengeful Kami. It's a dragon spirit, flying trample 6/6 for 1 and WUBERG. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, if that player attacked you in his or her last turn, exile target non-land permanent that player controls. So it's just a bit of a hate piece. You know, someone hits you, you're going to smack them back and hurt them more. Bladewing, we've sort of spoken about quite a bit. Really sweet card there. Karthus, Tyrant of Jund. It's just really just to give everything haste, and then you can untap all of your dragons. So it's kind of like going for an alpha strike, but then being safe in the, I guess, the swing back, because you've untapped everything, so you've got blockers again. Clouth, Unrivaled Ancient, another sweet card from one of the recent commander sets. Whenever he attacks, you add X mana in any combination of colors, where X is the total power of attacking creatures. Spend only to cast spells until end of turn. You don't lose mana as steps and phases end. So yeah, really sweet card. Obviously the total power of your creatures is going to be huge. So you want to use it to sort of, you know, attack in, you know, let's say you've got like 5 or 6, let's say you've got 5 or 6 dragons and, you know, maybe 10 or 15 power. You send it everywhere, and then you've got enough to just start burning with all of your dragons approaches afterwards. So really sweet. Morph on the Boundless. So this is really just to discount everything by WUBERG. Really busted card. It also lords all of your dragons. So yeah, that's really fun to do. Tiamat is a, just, you know, it's a tutor more than anything, but it's a tutor that you can potentially cast for 0, because you've got your Morph out, and you've also got your Dragon Speaker Shaman. Really sweet. You can just reduce it to nothing, basically. And you can search for up to 5 dragon cards not named Tiamat that each have different names. You reveal them, shuffle, and, you know, put them all into your hand. So yeah, really dope way to just fill up your hand with like all of the cards that you want to basically attack with. So for something like Tiamat, you know, Morph plus the pile of the other WUBERG stuff like Vengeful Kami and Scion are probably your best bets to pick that up. Scion of Draco, another great one for that. But yeah. The last couple now, so we've got Hellkite Overlord, which is just another big Jund beater. So it's 8-drop for 8/8, flying trample haste, and you can fire breathe and regenerate it. So it protects itself a little bit, so pretty sweet if you're sort of just wanting to get that final bit of damage. You know, maybe you've already killed one of your opponents, or it's down to the last 1 or 2 players, and you've got to basically, you know, win with something that's a bit more resilient. This is your go-to guy. We've got Utvara Hellkite, which is just more dragons when you attack. So you attack with 5 dragons, make another 5 dragons that are 6/6s. They're really sweet. So yeah, really cool. The last dragon, I'll skip over Dragonstorm. Last dragon is Scion of Draco. Spell costs 2 less for each basic land type. Look, basically in this deck, it's going to cost you 2. If you're fetching correctly, it should cost you 2 on turn 2. You can have a 4/4. On turn 2 for this, and it just turns all of your dragons into even bigger shit than they are already. So each creature you control has vigilance if it's white, hexproof if it's blue, lifelink if it's black, first strike if it's red, and trample if it's green. So, you know, Tiamat, Vengeful Kami, Scion, and even the O-Dragon, they all get all 5 of them, so it's absolutely insane. So the last non-land card is Dragonstorm, which is, it's 8 and a 1 for a sorcery. Search your library for a dragon permanent card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library, and it has Storm. So this will win you the game if you have Storm 3, because you've got the Morite combo. It'll win you the game 100 different ways if you've got Storm count of like 5 or 6, because you can have everything enter with haste that also deals damage to everything, and then it'll be attacking and dealing damage as it attacks, and then you'll be putting more dragons into play, and they will also be doing more damage again and again. So really sweet card. It's definitely a 1-card finisher, provided that you can get the Storm count. So, you know, it's sometimes handy to have these like sort of cheaper artifacts and everything that we discussed at the beginning. And yeah, just, yeah, dope card overall. So that pretty much brings out all of the non-lands. So yeah, really fun time with that. Bringing out the lands, as you can see, we've got, you know, a pretty good assortment of everything here. So we've got all of our lands that we're looking at are either fetch lands, or they have a basic land type, which is mountain. Now there are a few exceptions. We have Cascading Cataracts. Cascading Cataracts is You pay 5 and tap to filter 5 into WUBRG. So that's really good, but it can also just filter into other combinations as well. So really sweet for that. We've got all of our triomes in red, so you've got all 4 triomes in red, so they're a cycling card as well, which is great, along with Canyon Slow and Cinderglade, no sorry, not Cinderglade, what's the other one? It's the green-red one, and I feel like I maybe missed it. Oh well, there's plenty of other things that you can be having, you know, for this. So we've got all of our triomes. We've got every single shock in red. We've got all of the tapped snowlands. Now, probably just a bit of a caveat: if you have access to dual lands, you can swap these tapped snowlands for your, you know, your plateaus and your Taigers and everything like that. I think that it's probably not going to be a big deal in this deck. You don't really need to be playing into fixing and curve aggressively with this deck. It's like 90% are just red drops, and then you know, you've got maybe 15% is green as well. So yeah, it's really not too big. It's not too much of a big deal for a deck like this. The last few, we've got the World Tree. So the World Tree just basically gives all of your lands the ability to tap for any color, so that's really sweet. The rest of the text on the card is irrelevant. Valakut, as we mentioned, it's really just about, you know, pinging everyone incrementally with the Valakut triggers. You can have Thespian Stage become a copy to become your second Valakut. With that, you can have Vesuva enter after the Valakut's entered, and it can become a copy of it as well. And that's pretty much it for the actual deck. So yeah, it's a very sort of basic mana base. You could absolutely cut the fetch lands to save yourself probably $200 or $300. You cut the fetch lands, just chuck in a couple of the other you know, mountain / X cards, and yeah, maybe even just some basics. You could put a Field of the Dead if you wanted to put in that as well, or even just a few utility lands. Even an Urza's Saga probably isn't too bad. It can get your Locket and your Sol Ring, so that's really sweet overall. So it's been quite a while since I've actually put together a Commander deck tech. Largely it's because I've just been really preoccupied with other formats. I'm playing Modern probably 2 or 3 times a week still, and playing quite a lot on Modo. And unfortunately, I just haven't had as much time as I would like to be playing casual Commander. I'm still playing a lot of competitive EDH, but not really a lot of the sort of high power to, you know, the casual side of things, or that mid power or janky stuff that I like doing. I never really played Battlecruiser, but I don't mind building really janky, I guess, silly decks that can sort of play in the Battlecruiser space. But yeah, for the most part, these decks are ideas that I have for things that I, you know, am really interested in building myself. And largely this one sort of, you know, piqued my interest again. I started brewing around this again when we saw Thrumming Stone get that reprint, because I think it's now $11, so that's really sweet. I'm a bit sad because I actually started collecting all of the Dragons approaches. I think I got up to about 10 or 11, you know, and then recently just buy listed all the non-foil ones. So bit of a bummer that I'll have to go and pick those up again. But thank you so much for checking out the video. I just thought this would be a really good time. Dragon's really popular at the moment with the release of Baldur's Gate Dungeons and Dragons. So I thought, you know, maybe now's the time to do a bit of an updated deck list for 2022. So if you like what you see, thanks so much for checking it out. Feel free to give us a like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that kind of stuff. It really helps with the algorithm. But yeah, thanks so much for checking everything out, and I'll see you next time.